from the Pangs of Love by Jane Gardam. First I'm gonna give you a little info about this series. Of course, the title, The Pangs of Love. I don't know if it's Pangs of Love is the title of this exact text, because this text is a part of a larger series published by Jane Gardam, who's the author of the series, in 1983, where there's several texts under the name of The Pangs of Love and other texts. So maybe it's this one because the exact words are mentioned in the story on page 3. And the literary period of this time, 1983, is called postmodernism or magical realism. And these periods are defined by their realism. No more of these grand tales of fantastical things. There's a more realistic twist to them. That's also in the name of the magical realism, which I believe this is a part of, where there is a magical setting, but there's a realistic twist to it. So no more of those, and they lived happily ever after. They're more sad and, realistic in tone. The genre, I believe that this is a short story, and I believe this because there are only a few characters in it, and the story takes place over a short period, and we only really have one setting and one location for the story, and that's under the sea in the Sea Palace. For the composition, I'm first going to give you a little summary of it. The Pangs of Love is a modern version of The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen. This time the prince seeks a mermaid, the sister of the original mermaid, who has a mind of her own, and he wants to get married and live happily ever after. But this is not how it goes. They meet on the sea, and the little mermaid, the mermaid tells him to sacrifice a few things, including his legs, for him to be married to her. Also that he must accept that one day she may leave him. The prince agrees to these terms, and they have a big party at the Sea Palace. During the party, the two go to meet the Sea Witch, which has the power to do these things, make these sacrifices for him, take away his legs and stuff. But as the moment comes for him to sacrifice these things, he bails on her. He jumps up and out of the water, back to his real wife on land, and leaves the seventh mermaid, could be named Hulu, we don't know, back down in the sea with no husband. And 2 seconds, I'm gonna power it out of my computer. And then he leaves the mermaid sad under the water, and that's the end of the story. So the plot of this story, as explained, is that man meets mermaid. The prince wants to marry her, agrees to make sacrifices, but when the last moment comes and he has to make them, my sister just interrupted me. The plot, we went to that when the real things get going and he has to sacrifice, he doesn't do them and flees. Yes. This story is told from the point of view in the beginning, from the prince's point of view. "Oh, princess, sweet mermaid," he said, finding her at once. "I have found you again. Ever since I threw you back at the sea, I have dreamed of you." He seems like this Prince Charming from the Disney versions of these fairy tales. He's perfect, and he wants to sacrifice himself for her, but we see that doesn't quite happen. Soon after that, we shift to the mermaid's point of view and of her story. But all of the time, it's third-person narrative, so we see it from the outside. It's just depending on from which story we hear more of. Yes, and the persons of the story. The characters. There are only 2 real main characters of the story. There are also others like the Sea Witch and the Seven Mermaids' grandmother, but they are sub-characters. They don't get mentioned a lot or don't have a lot of lines. The Seventh Mermaid also may be named Hulo, as seen on page 2, I believe. She's presented to us as a mermaid or girl with her own mind. She's a critical thinker, and she wants to ensure that the prince really loves her before she can marry him. So the same doesn't happen to her as that did to her sister. And that's why she asks him these questions of sacrifice and stuff like this. But we see that. Let me see what happens then. Yeah, the prince. He starts out, as I mentioned before, as this kind of Prince Charming, the Disney version of fairy tales. The good guy, the one who comes in and blows a kiss to the princess and she wakes up again from a long sleep. But that doesn't happen. He's quite of a narcissist, really, because we know that he has a wife on land and he's just left her for a little plaything like the seventh mermaid. And as soon as it gets hard, he has to sacrifice things. He just flees. He bails on the Seventh Mermaid. So that's why I've called him a narcissist as well, because he only loves himself. The Seventh Mermaid, the development of her, she develops from this critical thinker but hopeful in love to hating men and wanting to give up on them at the age of 15. At the end of the story, as we see, "No, they're all the same," said the mermaid, who by now was nearly 15 years old. "I've proved what I suspected. I'm free now. Free of the terrible pangs of love." Yeah. So she's going to be, she ended up hating men and being free from the shackles of love, I'm going to skip the environment time because I don't have the time for it. Stylistic features. The lingual style of this text is not that hard to read. There's no high difficult words to use. Everybody should be able to read it. To the symbols, I couldn't really find any symbols in this text, so that's why I've put it in the parentheses. Telemploys, fortællerknep. Let me see. Jane Garden, she uses medias res, for example. In the beginning of the story, "Oh, Princess Seventh Mermaid," he said, finding her at once. We are placed right in the middle of the story, and we don't know where we are. And that's also a ploy to make us think that the prince is a good guy. That she also has warnings. That's with where the mermaid tells him several times that he will have to sacrifice himself for it. And there's also a rule of 3 in it, where with the sacrifice, where she tells him once, tells him twice, he agrees both times, and then on the third time he doesn't. And interpretation. Themes. There's themes of unhappy love, strong, independent women, and that men are the same. Intertextuality. Of course, there's intertextuality in this text. It is based on The Little Mermaid, and that they have some of the same storytelling devices, not devices. Storytelling elements. Message. I've come to. On the first hand, you might read this as just the men are trash in this story, but it's going to be a little hard to see when the grandmother of the mermaid is actually disagreeing with her. So it's a bit of a assessment with that. Conclusion. I'm going to. I don't know if the words perspectivate to The Little Mermaid, of course, where they have the same plot elements, and it ends unhappily again for the mermaid in this story, The Little Mermaid, the original one, where she's actually ended up being rejected by the prince. So not like the Disney version, it ends unhappy in The Little Mermaid, the original one. And I've also chosen to perspective self-defense, the one in the Terminsprøve, because of the narcissism and the self-love, where the protagonist is driving with another escaped convict, and the other one he's driving with is only taking him along for the ride as escaping from the prison because he loves himself and he needs him to help him. So all that drives him, the other guy in self-defense, is love for himself. And that's all I had. Thank you.